In a significant and politically charged decision, the U.S. Senate has voted on resolutions aimed at halting planned arms sales to Israel, in response to what many lawmakers and human rights groups have described as disproportionate military actions in Gaza. The votes came after intense debate, public pressure, and growing bipartisan concern about civilian casualties and alleged violations of international law during Israel's ongoing operations in the Gaza Strip. Background: mounting civilian casualties and global outcry. Israel's recent military campaign in Gaza has led to widespread devastation. Reports from human rights organizations, UN agencies, and independent journalists suggest that thousands of civilians, including women and children, have been killed or wounded in airstrikes targeting densely populated areas. The Israeli government maintains that it is acting in self-defense against Hamas rocket attacks and terrorism. But critics argue the scale of its response has amounted to collective punishment. Amid growing international scrutiny and domestic pressure from advocacy groups and constituents, several U.S. lawmakers introduced joint resolutions of disapproval, aimed at blocking over $18 billion in weapons sales to Israel, including bombs, missiles, and other precision-guided munitions. Senate votes down the resolutions, but the message is clear. Despite passionate debate on both sides, the Senate ultimately voted down the resolutions. The measures needed a simple majority to pass, but fell short, with many lawmakers citing America's long-standing alliance with Israel and the importance of maintaining strategic deterrence in the Middle East. Still, the outcome was far from a landslide. A substantial minority of senators, including some key Democrats and a few Republicans, voted in favor of the bloc signaling, a notable shift in the political discourse around U.S. support for Israel. Senator Bernie Sanders, IVT, one of the most vocal supporters of the resolutions, called the vote a moral litmus test for U.S. foreign policy. "We cannot continue to provide weapons unconditionally to a government accused of committing war crimes," Sanders said on the Senate floor. "Our military aid must come with accountability." Growing division within the Democratic Party, the debate has exposed deepening fractures within the Democratic Party. While President Joe Biden and senior party leadership have reaffirmed their unwavering support for Israel's right to defend itself, a growing progressive wing including Senators Elizabeth Warren, Jeff Merkley, and Representatives Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Rashida Tlaib criticized what they see as unchecked military aid. Senator Chris Van Hollen, DMD, who ultimately supported the resolutions, said, "We must uphold international humanitarian law, even when our allies are involved. Civilians cannot be collateral damage." Meanwhile, centrist Democrats and many Republicans warned that blocking the arms deal could embolden Hamas and other Iranian-backed groups, potentially weakening Israel's deterrence in a volatile region. White House reaction and strategic implications. The Biden administration had signaled strong opposition to the resolutions ahead of the vote. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan defended the arms transfers, stating they are essential for Israel's defense and security against threats posed by terrorist organizations. However, Sullivan also acknowledged concerns over civilian deaths and reaffirmed the administration's call for Israel to take more precise and restrained military actions. Some analysts suggest that while the resolutions failed, they could still have a lasting effect on how future arms deals are approached, particularly with rising demands for human rights, conditions attached to military aid, public opinion shift, and grassroots mobilization. The vote followed weeks of nationwide protests and lobbying efforts by advocacy groups such as J Street, Jewish Voice for Peace, Amnesty International, and Code Pink. A recent Gallup poll showed a significant shift in public sentiment, especially among younger Americans, with increasing calls for the U.S. to condition or reduce its military support to Israel. Social media campaigns, university campus protests, and city council resolutions across major U.S. cities have echoed demands for greater accountability and transparency in U.S. foreign aid, particularly in conflict zones. International repercussions and diplomatic fallout. The Senate's decision is likely to reverberate beyond Washington. Several allied nations, including Canada, Ireland, and Norway have already suspended arms exports to Israel due to concerns about international humanitarian law violations. The European Union has called for an independent investigation into potential war crimes committed by both Hamas and the Israeli military. Palestinian officials have condemned the U.S. Senate's decision, calling it a green light for further violence. This vote shows that American weapons continue to fuel the bloodshed of innocent Palestinians, said a spokesperson for the Palestinian Authority. Israeli officials, on the other hand, welcomed the Senate's decision, viewing it as a reaffirmation of the strategic bond between the two nations. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu stated, "We are grateful for our American allies who continue to support our right to defend our citizens from terrorist threats." Conclusion: a turning point, or status quo. Although the resolutions to block arms sales to Israel ultimately failed, the debate has opened a new chapter in U.S. foreign policy discussions. The once near-universal support for Israel on Capitol Hill is no longer guaranteed, especially as younger generations of Americans and lawmakers demand a more values-based approach to international relations. This Senate vote may not have changed the immediate course of U.S.-Israel military cooperation, but it has certainly intensified the scrutiny of that relationship, and it could mark the beginning of a long-term shift in how American foreign aid is debated, authorized, and morally justified.